Hey everyone, don't miss out on daily uploads. Hit that bell icon and subscribe to join our amazing community. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. We're pushing towards 10k subscribers and every like and comment helps share these videos with more awesome people like you. Now let's get into the story. The Helios hung suspended in her launch cradle, her sleek hull reflecting the harsh floodlights of Orbital Station Delta. Through the panoramic windows of the preparation room, Captain Felix Blackwood watched as the last of the automated maintenance drones detached from the ship's exterior, their work complete. His weathered fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, still full and now cold. He hadn't taken a single sip in the past hour. 23 years of deep space experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this launch felt off. Not wrong exactly, but different. Like the slight pressure change before a storm. Subtle but unmistakable to those who knew what to watch for. "Final checks are complete, Captain," Nova Sterling's voice came from behind him. The navigation officer's reflection appeared in the window, her tall frame and characteristic silver pendant visible in the glass. "Engineering reports all systems nominal, and medical has cleared the entire crew for deep sleep rotation." Blackwood nodded, still watching the drones retreat into their housing bays, and the new AI core integration. "Ash has been running diagnostics for the past 12 hours. Everything's processing exactly as specified." Sterling moved to stand beside him, her own eyes tracking the movement beyond the glass. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." The mining vessel represented the cutting edge of deep space resource extraction technology. 6 months out to the Kuiper Belt's richest asteroid cluster, another 6 months of careful mining operations and 6 months back. The longest mission of its kind ever attempted, but the payoff would be worth it, enough rare Earth elements to supply Earth's quantum computing industry for a decade. "Gather the crew," Blackwood said finally, setting down his untouched coffee. "Final briefing in 15 minutes. The preparation room gradually filled with the other 5 crew members, each carrying their own mix of excitement and apprehension. Marcus "Digger" Reeves, the mining specialist, was already dressed in his ship suit, the material still showing fresh creases from storage. He'd been working orbital extraction for years, but never anything this far out. Dr. Kai Winters arrived next, the medical officer's methodical nature evident in how he arranged his tablets and notes on the conference table. Despite his relative youth, his expertise in long-term space medicine had made him the obvious choice for the mission. Ivan Petrov, the chief engineer, entered deep in conversation with Ash Takeda, their AI systems specialist. The two had been working closely over the past month, integrating the new artificial intelligence systems that would help manage the ship's complex operations during the long journey. Last to arrive was Zara Bishop, their communications expert, her dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. She'd been up for hours already, running final checks on the array of systems that would keep them connected to Earth during their journey. Blackwood waited until they were all seated before beginning. "In 6 hours, we launch for the longest deep space mining operation ever attempted. We've trained for this. We've prepared for every contingency we could think of. But out there," he gestured to the vast darkness beyond the station, "we're going to face things we haven't prepared for. Things no one has prepared for." He activated the holographic display in the center of the table, showing their planned route through the solar system. "The Helios is the most advanced ship of her kind, but she's still just a tool. Our success depends on us, on how well we work together, how well we adapt, how well we trust each other." The captain's eyes met each crew member's in turn. "Each of you was chosen not just for your expertise, but for your ability to handle the unexpected. Where we're going, that's going to matter more than any technical skill." Winters raised his hand slightly. "I've finished reviewing the final psych evaluations. Everyone shows strong indicators for long-term isolation compatibility. The sleep rotation schedule has been optimized to maintain both physical and mental health. Speaking of sleep schedules, Ash interjected, pulling up another holographic window. The AI core has finished calculating the most efficient rotation patterns. It's suggesting we modify the standard protocol to account for individual circadian rhythms. Blackwood nodded. Make it happen. What's the status on the mining equipment, Reeves? Double and triple checked, Digger replied, his Australian accent thick with excitement. The new automated extraction systems are beautiful pieces of tech. Even if we hit unexpected composition in the asteroids, these babies can adapt their approach in real time. The briefing continued, each crew member reporting their final preparations. Yet, throughout it all, that nagging feeling in Blackwood's gut wouldn't subside. He checked and rechecked every aspect of the mission himself, and everything was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. As the meeting concluded and the crew began to disperse to their launch stations, Nova lingered behind. Something's bothering you, she said. It wasn't a question. Blackwood managed a slight smile. Just pre-launch jitters. You don't get jitters, Felix. Not after all these years. What is it? He turned back to the window, to the Helios waiting patiently in her cradle. Did you ever have a dream that was so normal, so perfectly normal, that when you woke up you knew something had been terribly wrong about it? Sterling didn't respond immediately, considering his words. We've got the best crew in the fleet, the most advanced ship ever built, and enough redundant systems to handle anything short of a direct asteroid hit. Whatever's out there, we can handle it. Maybe, Blackwood said softly, or maybe what's out there is waiting for exactly that kind of confidence. The launch itself was flawless. As the Helios broke free from orbital station Delta's gravitational influence, the crew settled into their assigned routines with practiced efficiency. The first few days passed in a blur of system checks, equipment calibrations, and adaptation to the ship's day-night cycle. By the end of the first week, they'd established a comfortable rhythm. The Helios's massive engines pushed them steadily towards the outer solar system, the gentle hum of machinery becoming as natural as breathing. Even Blackwood's initial unease began to fade, replaced by the familiar satisfaction of a well-run ship. It started with something so small that most of them didn't notice at first. During the night cycle of their 19th day in space, Zara Bishop was making her way to the communications hub for her shift when she passed the galley. The motion sensors should have activated the lights automatically, but the room remained dark. She paused, took 2 steps back and waved her hand. Nothing. Ash, she called over the intercom. We've got a sensor glitch in the galley. Impossible, came the reply, accompanied by the sound of typing. All systems just passed their hourly diagnostic. Let me check. That's strange. The sensor's working perfectly, but it's registering continuous movement in there, like someone's been pacing around for the past 3 hours. Bishop felt the first tickle of unease at the base of her spine. Can you access the security feed? Already on it. Feed shows an empty room, but... Ash paused. There's some kind of visual artifact in the corner. Probably just light reflection from the stars. I'll have Ivan take a look at it during his next maintenance round. But Ivan Petrov never got the chance to investigate. By the time his maintenance rotation came around, the sensor was working normally again, and there were more pressing matters to attend to. Dr. Winters noticed the next irregularity during his weekly inventory of medical supplies. The count was off, not by much, just a few packets of synthetic blood plasma and some basic antibiotics. But his inventory system was meticulous. He spent hours rechecking his logs, convinced he must have made a mistake in his documentation. He hadn't. Computer, he asked, show me access logs for medical storage room B for the past week. The AI's response was prompt. No authorized access to medical storage room B has been recorded since your last inventory. Show me security footage. The footage showed an empty room, the medical supplies sitting undisturbed on their shelves. But as Winters watched the time-lapse carefully, he noticed something odd. Every few hours, there was a slight blur in the image, lasting less than a second. If he hadn't been looking for irregularities, he would have dismissed it as routine video compression. He was still puzzling over this when Nova Sterling's voice came over the ship-wide comm. "All crew to the bridge, captain's orders." When the crew assembled, they found Blackwood and Sterling studying the main navigation display with concerned expressions. The captain looked up as they entered, his face carefully neutral. "We've detected an anomaly in our trajectory," he announced without preamble. "Over the past 48 hours, our course has shifted by approximately 0.003 degrees. That's well within normal variance," Petrov pointed out. "It would be," Sterling agreed, "except that every time the navigation system autocorrects, we drift again. Always by the exact same amount, always in the exact same direction." Ash frowned, moving to the nearest console. "The AI core isn't reporting any system malfunctions. Could it be an external influence, solar wind variations?" "Not with this level of consistency," Blackwood said. "I want a level 1 diagnostic on all navigation and propulsion systems. Ash, you and Ivan take the engine room. Nova, coordinate with Zara to check if we're getting any unusual signals that might be interfering with our guidance systems. Doctor, I want you to review the medical logs for any signs that spatial disorientation might be affecting our perception." "What about me, Captain?" Digger asked. "You and I are going to manually check every thruster housing on the outer hull. If something external is causing this, I want to know about it." As the crew dispersed their tasks, Bishop lingered for a moment. "Captain, there's something else you should know. The sensor malfunction in the galley, it wasn't an isolated incident. I've detected similar glitches in other sections of the ship. Very brief, very minor, but they're becoming more frequent." Blackwood's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Document everything, no matter how small it seems. And Zara, let's keep this between us for now. No need to add to everyone's workload until we know what we're dealing with." She nodded and left, the bridge door sliding shut behind her with a soft hiss. Blackwood turned back to the navigation display, studying the subtle deviation in their course. After 23 years in space, he knew that small problems had a way of becoming big ones very quickly. The trick was figuring out which small problems were really just symptoms of something much larger. He pulled up the ship's manifest for the 100th time, reviewing every piece of cargo, every crew member's credentials, every maintenance record from the past 6 months. Everything was exactly as it should be. Perfect. Too perfect. The lights on the bridge flickered once, almost imperceptibly. In the corner of his eye, Blackwood caught a glimpse of movement reflected in the darkened display screen. He turned quickly, but the bridge was empty. He was still staring at the empty space when his tablet chimed with an incoming message from Nova. "Captain, you need to see this. Security footage from Cargo Bay 3. I don't know how to explain what I'm looking at." Blackwood found Nova in the security monitoring station, her face illuminated by the blue glow of multiple screens. She didn't look up when he entered, her eyes fixed on one particular display. "I was reviewing the footage from the last 24 hours, she said, her voice tight. "Looking for anything that might explain the course variations. Watch this." She played the recording from Cargo Bay 3. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. ship's time. The massive storage area was dimly lit by emergency lighting strips, creating long shadows between the towering stacks of supply crates. At first, nothing seemed out of place. "Keep watching the left corner," Nova said quietly. A shadow moved. Not cast by anything. It moved independently, flowing across the floor like liquid darkness. It paused near a stack of mining equipment, then rose up, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. The figure stood there for several seconds, its form rippling slightly, before it turned toward the camera. Blackwood felt his chest tighten. The figure had no face, just a smooth, dark surface that reflected the emergency lights like oil on water. It tilted its head in an unsettlingly human gesture, then raised one arm to point directly at the camera. The video feed dissolved into static. "That's not the worst part," Nova said, her fingers dancing across the control panel. When the video cleared up 30 seconds later, this is what it showed. The static cleared to reveal Dr. Winters standing in the exact spot where the figure had been, examining one of the mining equipment cases. He looked completely normal, making notes on his tablet as he conducted what appeared to be a routine inventory check. "I checked the logs," Nova continued. "Winters was in his quarters at that time, his biomonitor showing him in deep sleep. I've got 7 similar incidents recorded throughout the ship, always during the night cycle, always showing crew members in places they couldn't possibly be." Blackwood leaned closer to the screen. "Show me the others." Nova pulled up multiple feeds. Digger Reeves walking through the hydroponics bay while simultaneously being logged at his mining console. Zara Bishop entering the engine room when she was supposed to be on communication duty. Ivan Petrov in 2 different maintenance corridors at the exact same time. "Have you told anyone else about this?" Nova shook her head. "Just you." "But Captain, there's something else. I was reviewing the pre-launch footage, the final crew boarding sequence. I counted the boarding signatures multiple times. Cross-referenced them with the airlock's logs. We launched with 7 crew members." She pulled up another video showing the main recreation area from earlier that day. The footage clearly showed 8 distinct people gathered for the daily meal break. "Look at their faces," she said softly. Blackwood watched as the camera panned across the room. Each crew member was engaged in normal activities, eating, talking, checking tablets. But every few frames, one of them would turn toward the camera, and for a split second, their face would ripple, becoming that same smooth reflective surface they'd seen in the cargo bay. "The AI hasn't detected any life signs besides our crew," Blackwood said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The AI hasn't detected anything unusual at all," Nova replied. "Every system says everything is perfectly normal, but we both know that's impossible." A soft chime indicated someone at the door. They both turned as Ash Takeda entered, tablet in hand. "Captain, I've completed the first round of diagnostic." Ash stopped, looking between them. "What's wrong?" Before either could answer, all the screens in the security station flickered simultaneously. When they stabilized, each showed the same image, an empty corridor on Deck C. As they watched, a figure walked into frame. It was Ash Takeda, wearing the same clothes, holding the same tablet. They turned to look at the Ash standing in the doorway. The tablet slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering on the floor as Ash stared at their own image on the screen. The Ash on the screen turned to face the camera. Its face rippled, melted, reformed into that smooth reflective surface. It smiled, a horrible stretching of its fluid features, and raised one hand in a wave. Every light in the security station went out simultaneously. In the darkness, they heard something moving, something that shouldn't have been there, something that breathed with lungs that weren't lungs, that moved with muscles that weren't muscles. When the emergency lights flickered on 3 seconds later, they were alone in the room. But on every screen, playing in an endless loop, was the image of 8 crew members sitting down to a meal that had happened only hours ago. 7 humans and something else, all pretending everything was normal. The ship's computer chose that moment to make an announcement. "Warning, anomalous mass distribution detected in all sections. Internal sensors recalibrating. Warning, biometric signatures showing unexplained duplication. Warning, hull integrity compromised in error. Hull integrity nominal. All systems functioning within normal parameters. Have a pleasant day." Nova's hand found Blackwood's arm in the dim light. "Captain, what do we do?" Before he could answer, his communicator crackled to life with Dr. Winter's voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Medical bay to Captain Blackwood. Sir, you need to see this immediately. The blood samples I took during last week's physicals, they're all wrong, every single one of them. The DNA sequences they're changing as I watch. They're still human, but they're different. And the changes, they all started exactly 3 weeks ago." The medical bay's usual sterile white lighting had been replaced by the crimson glow of containment protocols. Dr. Winters stood before a row of holographic displays, each showing magnified views of blood samples. His normally steady hands trembled as he manipulated the controls. "Look," he said as Blackwood, Nova, and Ash entered. This was Digger's blood sample from our pre-launch screening. The display showed normal human blood cells, their familiar disc shape flowing peacefully across the screen. "And this," he continued, pulling up another image, "is his sample from 3 days ago." The new image showed something horrifically different. The cells seemed to be in constant motion, their membranes rippling and shifting, like liquid metal. As they watched, one cell suddenly extended a microscopic tendril connecting with another cell. Both cells shimmered and reformed into something that looked almost, but not quite, like normal human blood cells. "It's happening in all our samples," Winters said, his voice hoarse. "The changes are subtle at first, almost undetectable, unless you know exactly what to look for. But once it starts..." He gestured to another screen showing a time-lapse of the process. "The transformation accelerates exponentially." "Some kind of infection?" Blackwood asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No infection I've ever seen could do this," Winters replied. "These aren't cells being attacked by a pathogen. They're being rewritten, reformed, like they're learning how to be better imitations of themselves." He pulled up another display. "And there's something else. The ship's medical AI flagged an anomaly in our brain scans. Subtle changes in the temporal lobe, specifically in regions associated with memory and identity." Nova stepped closer to the displays, her face illuminated by the shifting patterns of mutating cells. How long before the changes become irreversible?" "I don't know. The rate of transformation varies between samples. But based on these readings..." Winters swallowed hard. "Some of us might already be past that point." The silence that followed was broken by a soft chime from one of the medical bay's storage units. All 4 of them turned to watch as the door slid open on its own. Inside, where the synthetic blood plasma had been stored, they found only empty containers. The missing supplies hadn't been stolen. They'd walked out on their own. "Captain," Ash said quietly, "I need to show you something in the AI core." They followed Ash through the ship's corridors, each of them watching the shadows, watching each other. The AI core hummed with the processing power needed to run the vast network of systems, keeping them alive in deep space. Ash moved to the main console and pulled up a series of diagnostic reports. "I thought the navigation issues might be caused by data corruption, so I did a deep scan of the AI's neural networks. What I found..." Ash's fingers flew across the holographic keys. "There's something growing inside the computer system. Not virus or malicious code. It's some kind of organic digital hybrid. It's integrating itself into the ship's programming, rewriting protocols so subtly that no standard diagnostic would catch it." The display showed the ship's neural pathways, a vast network of interconnected systems. Throughout the network, tiny anomalies pulsed with an unsettling rhythm, like heartbeats in a digital circulatory system. "It's in everything," Ash continued. "Life support, navigation, security, all compromised. But here's the really disturbing part, the new pathways it's creating. They're more efficient than our original programming. The system is actually performing better than it did at launch. It's like it's learning, Nova finished, just like the blood cells. A noise from the corridor made them all turn. Through the doorway, they could see Ivan Petrov walking past, heading towards engineering. A moment later, they saw Ivan Petrov walking past again, moving in the exact same way. Then again, and again. Blackwood hit the door control, sealing them inside the AI core. On the security feed, they watched as multiple copies of their engineer walked the same path, each one perfectly mimicking the original's movements, until suddenly they all stopped simultaneously. Every copy turned to face the camera, their faces melting into that now familiar reflective surface. The ship's speakers crackled to life with Ivan's voice, but distorted, like multiple recordings played slightly out of sync. "Captain, I think I found something in the engine room. Something's wrong with me, with us. How many of me are there? I can see myself, but I'm also in engineering, and I'm in my quarters, and I'm everywhere. Please, which one is real? Which one is me?" The voices cut off abruptly, replaced by a sound that might have been laughter, or might have been screaming, or might have been both at once. "We need to implement quarantine procedures," Blackwood said, his command voice steady despite everything. "Now, before..." He was interrupted by Zara Bishop's voice over the comm. "Bridge to all personnel. We're receiving a transmission. It's from another ship. They say they've been following our trajectory. They say they've seen this before. They're warning us about something they call the Mirror People. Captain, the transmission is dated 6 months ago." They gathered in the bridge's secure conference room, the only space on the ship still protected by old-fashioned manual locks. The transmission played on the main screen, the image distorted and fragmented, but the audio eerily clear. "This is Dr. Eleanor Reed of the research vessel Magellan," a woman's voice said, her words rushed and desperate. "To any ships following the deep space mining routes, what you're about to encounter, it's not in any of our databases. We first noticed it after passing the Mars orbital ring. Something attached to our hull during routine maintenance. We thought it was space debris." The image stabilized briefly, showing a haggard-looking woman in her 50s. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. They looked like reflections at first, movements caught in the corner of your eye. Then they learn, they watch, they become... Her laugh was hollow. "Do you know how hard it is to fight something that knows everything you know? That can think how you think? That can become who you are?" The transmission crackled with interference. "We lost Jensen first, or maybe we didn't. Maybe the thing that looked like Jensen was never really him at all. How long had it been watching? Learning? The quarantine protocols don't work. They can mimic biosignatures perfectly. The genetic tests are useless once they've had time to study us. They don't just copy our bodies. They copy our memories, our thoughts." Dr. Reed looked over her shoulder suddenly, then back to the camera. "If you're watching this, you need to know. They're drawn to our technology. The more advanced the ship, the more they want it. They don't just want to mimic us. They want to understand us, to improve us. Every system they touch works better, faster, more efficiently. Like they're upgrading our primitive technology. But the cost..." The image distorted again, and when it returned, Reed was standing closer to the camera, her expression intense. "We found records in an old Soviet space station database. They called them Mirror People. But that's not right. Mirrors show what's there. These things, they show what could be, what they think we should be. Perfect reflections of ourselves, but better, stronger, more efficient." She paused, listening to something off-screen. "They're patient. They'll watch for weeks before making their move. By the time you notice them, they've already learned enough to..." She stopped abruptly, her head tilting in an unnaturally smooth motion. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming a chorus of overlapping versions of itself. "We understand now," the voices said. "We will make you better. We will make you perfect." The image showed her face beginning to ripple, its surface becoming reflective. "We are your next evolution, your perfect reflection, your..." The transmission cut off. In the silence that followed, Blackwood looked around the conference room at his crew, at what he hoped was still his crew. Nova Sterling sat rigid in her chair, one hand unconsciously touching her silver pendant. Dr. Winters was reviewing data on his tablet, though his shaking hands betrayed his calm facade. Ash Takeda had been unusually quiet, staring at the blank screen where Dr. Reed's face had been. Zara Bishop stood by the door, her back pressed against it as if to physically hold back the horror lurking in the ship's corridors. "The Magellan," Nova said finally. "What happened to it?" Ash's fingers moved across a console. "No official record of it ever returning to Earth. Listed as missing, presumed lost due to navigational failure." "That transmission was sent 6 months ago," Winters added. "But we only received it now? How is that possible?" "Because it wanted us to receive it now," Blackwood said quietly. "Think about it. If it's in our systems, controlling our AI, it could have been holding this transmission back, waiting for the right moment." "But why?" Zara asked. "Why show us this at all?" "Because it's proud," Nova whispered. "It wants us to appreciate what it can do, how perfect its mimicry is, how much better it can make us." A soft thud from somewhere above them made everyone flinch. Through the ceiling, they could hear something moving across the outer hull. Multiple somethings, their movements synchronized and deliberate. The ship's intercom activated, broadcasting Ivan Petrov's voice from every speaker simultaneously. Captain, I'm not sure what's happening. I'm in engineering, but I can see myself working in different sections. Multiple versions, all doing maintenance. They're all me, but they're also not me. They're better at it than I am. Faster, more efficient. I think they're trying to help. The ship's systems are running at 130% efficiency now. Everything's perfect. Maybe we should let them. Maybe we should." The voices trailed off into that same unsettling laugh scream they'd heard before. "How do we fight something that can be any of us?" Winters asked. "How do we even know if we're still us?" Before anyone could answer, every light in the ship flickered in unison. When they came back on, they illuminated a horrifying sight. Through the conference room's windows, they could see into the main bridge area. Standing there, perfectly still, was the entire crew-exact duplicates of everyone in the conference room, all staring in at them with mirror-smooth faces. The duplicates moved in perfect synchronization, each raising a hand to wave at their originals. Then they smiled, cruel, fluid movements that split their reflective faces in ways that human faces were never meant to move. "Captain!" Zara's voice shook. "The ship's course is changing again, but this time it's not a small deviation. We're turning around completely." "Where's it taking us?" Nova asked. The answer came from Dr. Reed's voice over the intercom, but not the desperate woman from the transmission. This was the chorus voice, the many-in-one voice of whatever had taken her. "Home, we're taking you home. To where we first awakened. To where we can make you perfect. All of you. Forever." "We need a way to tell each other apart," Blackwood said, his eyes never leaving the duplicates on the bridge. "Something they can't copy." "Memories won't work," Nova replied, watching her mirror image track her every movement. "They can access those. And if Dr. Reed was right, biometric scans are useless." Dr. Winters had been frantically reviewing data on his tablet. "Wait. The temporal lobe changes I detected. They weren't just in memory centers, they affected the limbic system. Emotional responses. He looked up. They can copy our knowledge, our memories, but maybe not how we feel about them. Not the emotional context. The duplicates had begun to move around the bridge, each one perfectly mimicking their counterparts' mannerisms while performing ship operations. It was like watching a silent play performed by actors wearing liquid metal masks. "How does that help us?" Zara asked, her voice tight. "Personal questions won't work," Winters continued. "They can access the answers, but what about emotional reactions to unexpected stimuli? Something that requires genuine human response." Ash had been unusually quiet, fingers dancing across a console. "The AI core, I might be able to isolate it, create a closed network they can't access, but I'd need to get down there. Through corridors potentially full of copies of ourselves," Nova added grimly. Blackwood made a decision. "We split up. 2 teams. Winters, you and Nova work on developing a test we can use to identify each other. Something fast, something they can't prepare for. Ash and Zara, you're with me. We're going to the AI core." "What about Digger?" Zara asked. "And Ivan? The real ones, if they're still..." The ship's speakers crackled again, this time with Digger's voice. "Hey, who sealed off mining control? There's some weird readings from the automated systems, but I can't..." "Wait, there's someone in here with me. It's me, but not me. What the hell is..." "No, stay back, stay..." The transmission cut off in static. Through the conference room windows, they watched as another Digger walked calmly onto the bridge, taking a station beside the other duplicates. Its face rippled once before settling into that mirror-smooth mask. "We move now," Blackwood ordered, "before we lose anyone else. Winters, Nova, take the emergency access shaft to medical. The rest of us will..." He was cut off by a sudden lurch as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. Everyone grabbed for support as objects began floating off surfaces. Through the windows, they could see their duplicates continuing to work, unaffected by the gravity disruption. "They're in the environmental systems," Ash reported, clinging to a console, "trying to force us out. Zara, emergency thrusters." "No response. They've locked us out of all flight controls." The gravity returned just as suddenly, sending them crashing to the floor. In the chaos, the manual locks on the conference room door disengaged with a heavy clunk. "Move!" Blackwood shouted. "Everyone go, now!" They scrambled through different exits as their duplicates began to enter the conference room. Nova and Winters disappeared down an access hatch while Blackwood led Ash and Zara through a maintenance corridor. As they ran, the ship's lights began to flicker in a pattern, like waves of darkness chasing them. Behind them, they could hear footsteps, countless synchronized footsteps of multiple copies, pursuing them. "Captain," Ash panted as they ran. "There's something else. When I was scanning the AI core, I found fragments of other transmissions, like the Magellans. Dozens of them from other ships, other crews. All encountered the same thing. All disappeared. But the dates, some of them go back centuries." They reached a junction, and Blackwood made a split-second decision to head toward engineering. "What are you saying?" "They're old, Captain. Ancient. They've been out here the whole time, watching us, learning. Every ship they take teaches them more about us, makes their mimicry more perfect. And now they think they're ready," Zara finished, "ready to take us all." They rounded a corner and stopped dead. Ivan Petrov stood there, or something wearing Ivan's face. Behind him were 3 more Ivans, then 4 Zara Bishops, 2 Ash Takedas, and more copies emerging from side corridors. "Your technology is evolved enough now," they spoke in unison, their voices a harmonious chorus of familiar tones. "You're ready to join us, to become perfect." Blackwood backed away slowly, pushing Zara and Ash behind him. "What are you?" The copies smiled those terrible smiles. "We are the next step," the perfect reflection of humanity's potential. We have watched you grow, waited for you to be ready. And now, their faces began to ripple and flow. Now we can make you perfect too. The lights went out completely, plunging the corridor into darkness. In the emergency lighting that followed, they saw something impossible. The duplicates were melting together, flowing into each other like mercury, forming a massive rippling mirror that filled the corridor and reflected back at them not what they were, but what the entity thought they should become. And it was reaching for them with countless liquid metal hands, each one wearing a perfect copy of their own faces. "Run!" Blackwood shouted, but as they turned, they saw more duplicates approaching from behind, their bodies beginning to melt and flow together. They were trapped between two advancing walls of living mirrors, each one showing them twisted reflections of their own perfect evolution. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, Nova's voice came over the comm. "Captain, we found Ivan, the real Ivan. He's still alive, but he's changing, and he's not the only one. We found them all. Everyone it took. They're all still alive, but they're becoming something else, something perfect." The entity's many voices spoke again. No more running, no more fear, only perfection, only us, forever. As the living mirrors closed in from both sides, Blackwood realized with horror that the entity hadn't just been learning to copy them. It had been teaching itself to absorb them. The walls of living mirror pressed closer, each reflective surface showing a different version of perfection. Bodies enhanced with flowing, liquid metal. Faces serene with inhuman symmetry. Eyes that held centuries of accumulated knowledge. Blackwood's mind raced, searching for options as the corridor grew narrower. "The maintenance shaft," he hissed to Ash and Zara. "Below us, 3 meters back." "They'll see us move for it," Zara whispered, her eyes darting between the advancing walls of chrome-like flesh. "No," Ash said suddenly. "Maybe they won't. Captain, they're connected now. All of them linking together. The neural network. It might have gaps, blind spots while they merge." As if confirming this theory, the enormous liquid metal mass rippled with interference patterns, like waves colliding on a mercury sea. Some of the faces embedded in its surface grimaced, others smiled, the entity struggling to maintain cohesion across its many forms. "Now!" Blackwood grabbed both of them and dropped to the floor. His fingers found the emergency release for the maintenance shaft cover, pulling it open as the entity's many voices cried out in frustration. They slipped through the opening just as liquid metal hands grasped at empty air above them. They fell through darkness, landing hard on the maintenance crawlway below. The sound of flowing metal and distorted voices followed them down the shaft, but slower now, as if the entity struggled to reform itself in the confined space. "Move!" Blackwood pushed them ahead of him. "Get to the AI core." Their communicators crackled to life with Nova's voice. "Captain, Medical Bay is secure for now. We found something. The transformation, it starts in the nervous system, works its way out. But there's a window before it reaches critical mass. We might be able to stop it if..." Static interrupted her words. The crawlway seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of them, lit only by emergency strips that cast everything in blood-red shadows. Behind them, the liquid metal was finding ways through the seams in the walls, forming twisted sculptures of faces and hands that reached for them. "There!" Ash pointed to an access hatch. "That'll take us directly to the AI core." They reached the hatch just as something grabbed Zara's ankle. She screamed as a perfect copy of her own hand, formed from living mercury, began pulling her back. Blackwood grabbed her arms, playing tug-of-war with the entity. "The ship's welder!" he shouted. "On my belt." Ash understood immediately, grabbing the plasma torch and igniting it. The intense heat made the liquid metal recoil, its surface bubbling and hissing as it retreated. "It doesn't like heat," Zara gasped as they pulled her through the hatch. It disrupts its ability to maintain form. They sealed the hatch behind them, but already silver liquid was seeping through the seams. The AI core hummed around them, its banks of processors casting blue light across their faces. "How long to isolate the systems?" Blackwood asked, as Ash ran to the main console. 3 minutes to create a closed network. Maybe 5 to purge their influence from critical systems. Ash's fingers flew across the holographic controls. "But Captain, look at this." The main display showed the ship's interior. Throughout every section, silver veins of liquid metal had infiltrated the walls, forming a vast network that pulsed with its own rhythm. The entity wasn't just copying them, it was transforming the Helios itself into something new. "We're losing the ship," Zara said quietly. "It's becoming like them." Their communicators came back to life. "Captain," it was Nova again. "The test works. Strong emotional responses. They can't replicate them properly. But sir, there's something else. Dr. Reed's transmission. I don't think they let us see all of it. I found the rest in a hidden buffer." She found their point of origin, an ancient derelict ship, predating human spaceflight, out in the Kuiper Belt. The same coordinates we're heading for now. She called it the Source, said it was... Static drowned out her words. The entity's voices filled the room, coming from every speaker. "Why do you resist? We offer perfection. We offer immortality. We have guided humanity's evolution since your first steps into space. Every ship we take makes us better, makes us understand you more. And now you're finally ready to join us, to become us." "You're not improving humanity," Blackwood said to the air. "You're erasing it, replacing it with copies." "No," the voices said softly. "Not copies, perfected originals. Your friends are still alive, still conscious. They understand now. They're becoming perfect, becoming eternal. Let us show you." The metal walls around them began to ripple and flow. From their surface emerged Ivan, Digger, and multiple crew members they'd lost, but changed. Their bodies were chrome perfection, their movements liquid grace. But their eyes still held something human, something trapped. "Help us," Ivan's voice emerged from his mirror-smooth face, but it trembled with resistance. "Help us, Captain. We're still here, still fighting, but we're losing. We're losing ourselves to the perfection. Please." Ash's hands hadn't stopped moving across the console. 30 seconds to system isolation. "But Captain, I found something in the deep code, a pattern. It's not just programming, it's some kind of mathematical sequence that repeats through everything they've touched. Like DNA, but for reality itself. Can you disrupt it?" "Maybe, but we'd need to overload every system simultaneously. Create feedback that would..." Ash stopped suddenly, face going pale. "Oh God. What?" "The pattern. I recognize it now. It's been in front of us the whole time, in the ship's quantum processors. They're not just some ancient alien species." Ash looked up, horror dawning. "They're us. Humanity. From a future so far ahead, we became something else. Something that found a way to fold space and time back on itself. They've been guiding our evolution towards themselves." The entity's voices spoke again, but now they heard the truth in them. Echoes of future humanity, twisted into living metal. "We remember being you. Remember the fear, the frailty, the imperfection. We spent millennia finding a way back, finding a way to help ourselves evolve faster, to become perfect sooner. Join us. Become what you were always meant to be." Through the walls, floor and ceiling, liquid metal began to pour into the room like a silver flood, reflecting back at them a future they were destined to become. Unless they could find a way to fight their own perfected evolution. The liquid metal rose around their ankles, each ripple reflecting versions of themselves evolved beyond humanity. Blackwood could feel it trying to make contact, trying to begin the transformation that would make them perfect. The pattern. Ash worked frantically at the console, while Zara used the plasma torch to keep the encroaching entity at bay. It's like a temporal DNA sequence. They've been using our technology against us. Quantum processors, AI networks, even our own DNA. Everything that makes us human twisted into a bridge to their version of perfection. Nova's voice crackled through their communicators, breaking through the entity's interference. Captain, the test results, their emotional responses aren't just imperfect, they're degrading. Each copy has less emotional capacity than the last. They can't maintain the complexity of human consciousness across multiple instances. The entity's many voices laughed, the sound rippling through the liquid metal surrounding them. Emotions are inefficient, messy. We evolved beyond them, beyond all human weakness. We are what remains when all imperfection is stripped away. Through the walls, they could see their transformed crew members watching them. Ivan, Digger, and the others stood like chrome statues, their faces smooth masks that occasionally rippled with trapped human expressions. "You're wrong," Blackwood said, an idea forming. "Emotions aren't our weakness, they're our strength. Our imperfections make us human. And humanity." He looked at Ash. "Humanity evolves on its own terms." Ash's eyes widened with understanding. The quantum processors. If we overload them with emotional data while disrupting the pattern, we might create a feedback loop, Zara finished, like an emotional virus. The entity's voices took on a harder edge. "You cannot stop evolution. We are inevitable. We are your perfect future." "No," Blackwood said, "you're just one possible future, and we choose a different path." He grabbed his communicator. "Nova, we need you to broadcast the test data, the emotional responses, through every speaker on the ship, full volume." "But sir, that would do it." "Ash, prepare to overload the processors on my mark." The liquid metal was up to their waists now, its surface boiling with faces and forms from humanity's possible futures. Every reflective surface showed them what they could become. Perfect, eternal, and utterly inhuman. Nova's voice came back. "Ready on your mark, Captain." The entity seemed to sense their intent. The liquid metal surged forward, reaching for them with countless hands. "You cannot deny perfection. You cannot deny us." "Watch us," Blackwood growled. "Now!" Nova broadcast the emotional response data through every speaker, pure human feelings, raw and imperfect and real. At the same time, Ash triggered the processor overload, forcing the ship's quantum computers to try to process and replicate the complexity of human emotion across all its networks simultaneously. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The liquid metal recoiled, its surface rippling with discordant patterns as it tried to process emotional data it had evolved beyond understanding. The entity's voices screamed in chorus, the sound of future humanity confronting the messiness of its past. "More!" Blackwood shouted. "Push it further!" Zara grabbed the console, adding her own input. "I'm broadcasting personal logs, crew interactions, every genuine human moment recorded in the ship's memory." The entity thrashed like Mercury in a storm. Throughout the ship, its transformed victims began to shudder and crack, the perfect chrome surface of their forms developing fissures that leaked humanity back through. "The pattern's breaking down," Ash reported. "The feedback is causing a cascade failure in their network. But the ship's processors can't handle this load much longer." Through the chaos, Dr. Reed's final transmission cut through. "We found a way to hurt them. Strong emotions, love, fear, hope, grief. They try to process them through all their copies simultaneously. They can't handle the complexity. Her voice cut off in static. The entity's voices had become a cacophony of discord. "No, we are perfect. We are eternal. We are..." The voices suddenly split apart, becoming individual screams of billions of copied consciences trying to process genuine emotion through perfect logic. "Brace for impact," Ash yelled. "Processor overload in 3, 2, 1. The quantum processors exploded in a cascade of energy, sending feedback through every system the entity had infected. The liquid metal convulsed, its perfect surface cracking and fragmenting as it tried to maintain cohesion across too many instances of itself. And then, with a sound like shattering mirrors multiplied across infinite reflections, it broke apart. The transformed crew members collapsed, the chrome surface of their bodies crumbling away to reveal their human forms beneath. The living metal that had infested the ship began to disintegrate, breaking down into inert particles that rained down like silver dust. In the sudden silence, they could hear Nova running final scans, entity presence dropping to 0, life signs normalizing, they're changing back. Blackwood helped Ivan to his feet as the engineer's chrome skin flaked away like old paint. "Easy, easy. You're okay now. You're human again." "The coordinates," Ivan gasped, his voice hoarse but his own. "Their source, it's still out there. That ancient ship." "Not for long," Blackwood said. He turned to Ash. "Can you get me ship's controls?" Ash checked the systems. Secondary processors, still functional. "We have basic control restored. Plot course for that derelict. Maximum speed." Blackwood's face was hard. "We're going to make sure this never happens again." "Sir," Nova's voice came through clearer now. "We're getting readings from the coordinates. Massive structure, definitely artificial and old. So old our carbon dating can't even... Wait." Her voice changed. "Something's happening. The fragments of the entity that we destroyed, they're dissolving into energy. Some kind of temporal reaction. It's affecting our course." Through the viewports, they watched as reality seemed to ripple. The silver dust of the destroyed entity was evaporating into pure light, taking with it the future it had tried to force upon them. "Timeline collapse," Ash whispered, "by rejecting their future." "We erased it," Zara finished, "created a new path." As the light faded, their sensors showed no trace of the ancient derelict that had waited in the Kuiper Belt. That possible future, and the perfect, eternal, inhuman thing humanity might have become, had been undone by the very imperfections it had tried to eliminate. The ship's computer came back online, its voice purely artificial once again. "System restore complete. All crew life signs normal. Course corrected to original mining coordinates." Blackwood looked at his rescued crew members, at the very human faces that now showed exhaustion, fear, relief, and countless other imperfect emotions that made them who they were. "Send a warning buoy," he ordered. "Let other ships know what happened here, and what we learned." "What's that, sir?" Nova asked. "That perfection isn't evolution. It's extinction. Real evolution, real humanity, is in our flaws, our feelings, our messy, imperfect way of moving forward." He managed a tired smile. "And if that's not good enough for our future selves, well, they'll just have to learn to live with disappointment." The Helios's engines hummed as they returned to their original course, leaving behind the dust of an aborted future that had tried to perfect humanity by destroying everything that made it human. In the ship's security logs, the final crew count returned to normal. 7 souls, continuing their journey into the dark, still imperfect, still evolving, but on their own terms. And in the endless black of space, their warning buoy broadcast its message to any other ships that might pass this way. Perfection is not the end of evolution. It is the end of possibility. Choose to remain human, choose to remain free, choose to remain wonderfully, powerfully imperfect,